Okay, picture this. You're in some amazing new city, feeling all the energy, but then you realize you're totally lost.
Mm.
Your phone's dead, your map app's gone haywire, and you're starting to freak out a little. Sound familiar?
We've all been there.
Definitely. And that's why today we're diving deep into the art of asking for directions. It's a skill that goes way beyond just, basic phrases.
Absolutely. It's about navigating different communication styles, cultural nuances, even the psychology of how we make sense of space.
Oh, for sure. I once got so turned around in New York, even with its grid system, I ended up taking a cab to a place 2 blocks away.
No way!
Seriously. The local giving me directions, they were so detailed, it felt like I was listening to a whole epic tale instead of a simple route.
It's funny how even in places we think we know, getting directions can turn into an adventure. I remember being in Paris, trying to find the specific bakery, asked for directions, and the person responded in this super fast French. I was more lost after than before.
Oh, I can totally imagine that. Makes you realize understanding directions is just as much about listening closely and asking for clarification as it is about, like, the first question you ask.
Right, exactly.
So where do we even start with this?
Well, the foundation is a clear, polite request. Something like, "Excuse me, can you help me find location?" That usually works wonders.
Direct and respectful, I like it. Are there any other ways to phrase it to make it sound more natural?
Tons. You could say, "Excuse me, I'm trying to get to location. Could you point me in the right direction?" That one's good if you're feeling totally lost and just need a general sense of where to head. Or, "Excuse me, I'm looking for location. Do you know how to get there?" This one kind of implies you're open to different ways of getting there, like walking, public transport, maybe even a shortcut.
These phrases are great, but honestly, sometimes even when you get directions, it's like listening to another language, even if it's, your native tongue.
Right.
What happens then?
That's where that active listening and asking for clarification comes in. Don't hesitate to say, "Could you repeat that, please?" Or, "Could you speak a little slower?" And, don't be shy about asking for landmarks, like, "Is there a park or a big building nearby that I should look out for?"
I love that tip. It's like building a map in your head as you go.
Hmm.
And it reminds me, sometimes you get directions, but you have no clue how far the place actually is.
Oh, for sure. Always, always ask, "Is it far from here?" That simple question can save you so much time and hassle. If they say it's a 5-minute walk, you're good. Relax, enjoy the stroll. But if they say it's like a 30-minute trek, you might want to hop in a taxi or look for a bus.
Right. Speaking of time, what about those times when you're on a tight schedule? How do you work that into asking for directions?
That's super important. When time is of the essence, adding that time constraint to your question can help. You could say something like, "Excuse me, I need to get to location by time. Could you tell me the quickest way to get there?"
Makes sense. That sense of urgency might encourage people to give you the most efficient route.
Yeah, exactly. And don't forget to ask about how long it'll actually take. How long will it take to get there by mode of transportation? Knowing that can help you plan, especially if you have a train to catch or a tour to join.
All right, so we've got the phrases. Now, how about we try them out, like a real-life scenario? Imagine you're a tourist in a new city, and you're looking for, let's say, a museum.
Love that. Let's see how those phrases work in action.
Okay, I'll be the lost tourist. Excuse me, I'm trying to find the Museum of Modern Art. Do you know how to get there?
Sure, you're actually pretty close. Walk down the street for about 2 blocks. You'll pass a nice park on your right. Then take a right after the park. The museum will be on your left.
Great, okay. Is it far?
It's a nice 10-minute walk. You'll know you're close when you see a big, colorful sculpture in front of the museum. Can't miss it.
Perfect, thanks. You mentioned it's about a 10-minute walk. Just to double check, how long would it take by bus? I'm a little short on time.
Ooh, gotcha. Well, the bus stop's right across the street. You can catch the number 12 bus, and it'll drop you off right in front. Should be about 5 minutes, accounting for traffic at this time.
Wow, that's super helpful. Thanks for the tips.
See?
Asking for directions doesn't have to be scary. With the right phrases and a little confidence, you can navigate any city like a pro.
Absolutely. Now let's switch it up a bit. Imagine I'm in a rush to catch a train, and you're the local who can guide me to the station.
Okay, I'm ready. Let's do it.
"Excuse me, I need to get to the train station by 3:00 p.m., and I'm a little lost. Can you tell me the fastest way to get there?"
Well, you're in luck. The train station is just a short walk from here.
Awesome. Can you point me in the right direction?
Definitely. See that tall building over there with the clock tower? Walk towards it, then take the first left after you pass the bakery. You'll see the station entrance right across the street. Shouldn't take you more than 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Perfect. Thanks so much.
No problem at all. Happy to help. Now, let's try a slightly different scenario. Let's say you're in a new city and you really need to find an ATM.
Ooh, this is a good one. ATMs can be surprisingly tricky to find when you're in a new place. I bet our listeners have some great questions about how to handle this.
For sure. Think about this, dear listener. How would you ask for directions to an ATM using what we've talked about today? What specific questions would you ask to make sure you find the nearest one as quickly as possible?
Don't be afraid to actually pause the audio here and practice saying the phrases out loud. It's amazing how much more confident you'll feel when you've actually rehearsed these interactions. And remember, clear, polite communication is key.
Always. Here's an example. Let's say I'm in that situation needing an ATM. I might say, "Excuse me, I'm looking for an ATM. Could you point me in the right direction?"
Perfect. Short, sweet, and polite. Now imagine they give you directions, but they use some local term you've never heard of, like go past the boots and turn left.
Oh, that's happened to me. I would be so lost.
Right. This is where clarifying those unfamiliar terms becomes super important. Don't be afraid to be like, excuse me, what is a boots? They might explain it's a shop or a landmark, and suddenly the directions make sense.
It's amazing how one word can change everything. It shows how asking for directions is a two-way street. It's not just about asking the right questions, but also about actively listening, clarifying, and making sure you really get what they're saying.
Exactly. And sometimes the challenge isn't even the language, but how the directions are given. Like in some cultures, people might rely a lot on landmarks and visual cues, while others are all about street names and numbers.
That's so true. I read somewhere that in some indigenous cultures, directions are given based on the sun's movement or the position of the stars.
That's fascinating. Those cultural differences can totally change how we give and receive directions. Being aware of those nuances can make navigating unfamiliar places a lot smoother. Like, if you're in a culture where landmarks are key, try asking for directions in a way that encourages that kind of information.
Mhm.
You could say, excuse me, I'm trying to find this address. Is there a specific building or landmark nearby that I should look for?
That's a smart strategy. Adapting your communication to fit the culture.
Absolutely. It's all about being mindful and respectful of different ways of communicating.
So we've covered the basics of asking, the importance of active listening and clarifying, and how culture plays a role. But what about those mental maps?
Mental maps are incredibly powerful. They help us picture our surroundings and remember directions better. It's like creating a mental picture of the route.
I've noticed that even if I don't remember the exact street names, having a general mental map helps me stay oriented.
Absolutely. And there are a few things you can do to boost your mental mapping skills. One is to pay attention to landmarks and distinctive features as you're getting directions. Like if someone says turn left at the red building, try to visualize that red building in your mind.
That makes sense. Connecting the directions to something you can easily remember.
Exactly. Another technique is to repeat the directions back to the person who gave them to you. It helps solidify the information in your memory and ensures you didn't miss any crucial details.
And it's a good way to catch any misunderstandings early on.
Right. Don't be afraid to ask for clarification on anything that's not clear. The more you engage with the directions, the more likely you are to remember them.
So as you go out and explore the world, remember, asking for directions is way more than memorizing phrases. It's about embracing the adventure of navigating new places, being open to different communication styles, and honing those mental mapping skills.
And who knows, you might even discover some hidden gem along the way. Sometimes getting a little lost can lead to the most amazing, unexpected experiences.
That's so true. The beauty of travel. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about something else that can be tricky for travelers. Public transportation. We've all been there standing in a crowded train station or bus terminal, feeling overwhelmed by the timetables, all those unfamiliar routes, and just the sheer number of people around you.
It can definitely feel a bit overwhelming, but with a few strategies, you can conquer public transport like a pro.
All right, so where do we start? What are some must-know phrases for navigating public transportation, especially in a foreign country?
One of the most important is, excuse me, does this train bus go to destination? It's your go-to for making sure you're headed in the right direction, literally. You can also ask, what time does the train bus to destination leave? You definitely don't want to miss your ride.
Those are great starting points. But what if the information isn't that obvious? Like, how do you figure out which bus stop to get off at if you're not sure?
That's where some creativity and a bit of politeness come in. You can try approaching someone who seems like a local and say, excuse me, I'm trying to get to destination. Do you know which stop I should get off at?
I like that approach. It combines asking for help with a bit of observation, relying on that local knowledge.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to double check with the driver or the conductor. You can say, "Excuse me, could you let me know when we reach destination?" That way, you're extra sure you don't miss your stop, especially if you're in a new area.
These phrases are so helpful. But sometimes the biggest hurdle isn't the language itself, it's those timetables and route maps. They can feel like a jumble of numbers, symbols, and abbreviations.
Oh, I know what you mean. Deciphering public transport schedules can be like solving a puzzle sometimes. But don't let those timetables scare you. With a little practice, you'll be navigating them like a pro.
So, any tips on actually understanding those timetables and maps?
First, take a deep breath. Familiarize yourself with the layout. Look for things like departure and arrival times, station names, route numbers. Don't be afraid to ask for help from the staff or other passengers if you're struggling.
Great advice. It's about breaking it down and not being afraid to ask for help when you need it.
Exactly. And nowadays, lots of transport systems have apps or websites that give you real-time info and help you plan your trip. Those apps can be so useful, especially if you're short on time or the local language is tricky.
Oh yeah, those apps are lifesavers. I use them all the time, especially for checking travel times or finding alternative routes if there are delays.
Absolutely. Technology can be a game changer for getting around. But even with all the apps and websites out there, sometimes the best source of info is a friendly local.
I totally agree. That human connection and local insight can't be beat. So listeners, as you head out on your next adventure, remember that public transportation doesn't have to be stressful.
No, not at all. With the right phrases, a bit of confidence, and a willingness to ask for help, you'll be riding those trains and buses like a seasoned traveler before you know it.
Speaking of local insight, let's dive into another fascinating aspect of asking for directions: the cultural nuances and nonverbal communication. We touched on this briefly, but it's worth digging deeper.
Oh, for sure. Understanding how cultural norms shape communication can make a huge difference when you're trying to get your bearings. For instance, in some cultures, it's considered rude to point directly at someone, while in others, it's totally fine.
That's such a good point. I've read that in some Asian cultures, people might use their whole hand to point instead of just one finger.
Exactly. And in some cultures, direct eye contact is a sign of respect, but in others, it can come off as confrontational. Those subtle differences in body language can affect how your request for directions comes across.
So how can we navigate those cultural differences without making a faux pas? It seems like a delicate balance between being respectful and getting the information you need.
You're right, it's a delicate dance. The key is to be observant, adaptable, and open to learning from those around you. Pay attention to how locals interact and try to mirror their style.
That makes sense. Blend in, show respect for local customs.
Exactly. And don't hesitate to ask if you're unsure about something. Most people are happy to explain, and they appreciate the effort you're making to understand their culture.
So we've seen that asking for directions goes way beyond just memorizing phrases. It's about embracing the adventure of cultural exchange, understanding nonverbal cues, and honing those mental mapping skills.
And most importantly, it's about connecting with the people you meet and appreciating that kindness from strangers.
Now let's switch gears a bit and talk about something that often trips up travelers: understanding local idioms and slang related to directions. We've all come across those phrases that locals use without a second thought, but to us, they're completely baffling.
Oh, absolutely. Local idioms can be a real minefield for anyone learning a new language. They often have meanings that are totally different from the literal translation of the words.
I remember being told to take a ride at the roundabout in London, and I had no idea what they were talking about. Turns out it's a traffic circle, but to me it sounded like something out of a fairy tale.
That's a perfect example. It highlights how crucial it is to be aware of those regional differences in language. What might be a common saying in one place could be completely foreign somewhere else.
So how can we prepare for those linguistic curveballs? Is it just a matter of memorizing a bunch of idioms?
While memorizing some common ones can help, it's impossible to know them all. The best thing you can do is be ready to ask for clarification when you hear something you don't understand. Don't be shy about saying, "Excuse me, I'm not familiar with that phrase. Could you explain what you mean?"
Such good advice. It's about being humble and admitting you don't know everything and being willing to learn.
Exactly. And in my experience, most people are more than happy to explain those local expressions and help you understand the little nuances of their language.
So as you explore new places and come across unfamiliar phrases, remember, embrace the challenge and never be afraid to ask for clarification.
It's all part of the fun of language learning and cultural immersion.
Now let's move on to a topic that's often overlooked but so important. Safety and awareness when asking for directions. It's all about balancing that excitement of exploring new places with being mindful of our surroundings.
You're absolutely right. Safety should always come first, especially in unfamiliar places.
So what are some key things to keep in mind when it comes to safety and being aware while we're asking for directions?
The most important thing, trust your gut. If a situation feels off or unsafe, get out of there. Don't hesitate to walk away or refuse to give personal information.
That is crucial. Better to be safe than sorry, as they say.
Absolutely. It's also a good idea to be mindful of where you are. Choose well-lit, busy areas to ask for directions, especially if you're alone at night.
Makes sense. Staying in well-populated areas can help prevent problems.
Exactly, and try to avoid flashing a lot of cash or expensive jewelry, as that can make you a target.
All great tips. But what about the actual interaction when you're asking for directions? Anything we can do to make that part feel safer?
One thing is to maintain a confident, assertive demeanor, even if you're feeling unsure. Make eye contact, speak clearly, and don't be afraid to project a sense of authority.
That's interesting. Projecting confidence can deter potential trouble.
It can. And if someone's approaching you in a way that feels aggressive or threatening, trust your gut and get out of that situation as quickly and safely as you can.
Always better to err on the side of caution.
Absolutely. And remember, if you ever feel unsafe or threatened, don't hesitate to call the local authorities or get help from people around you.
So as we go out and explore, let's aim to balance our love for adventure with a healthy dose of caution and awareness.
By being mindful, trusting our instincts, and following these safety tips, we can explore new places with confidence and peace of mind.
Now let's shift gears and talk about something that's become a big part of our lives. Technology. We have so many navigational tools available to us now.
You're right. From GPS apps to online maps, technology has completely changed how we navigate the world.
So how do we balance embracing technology with the more traditional art of asking for directions?
I think it's about picking the right tool for the situation.
Mm.
If you're in a familiar area with good cell service, those GPS apps are fantastic. They give you turn-by-turn directions, real-time traffic updates, and even estimated arrival times.
Those features are so helpful, especially if you're in a rush or not familiar with the roads.
Exactly. But sometimes technology isn't the best option. Like if you're somewhere remote with spotty cell service, your GPS might not be so reliable. Or if you're trying to find a specific landmark or hidden gem, sometimes a local's knowledge is more valuable than any app.
You're right. Sometimes that human touch is irreplaceable.
Absolutely. And let's not forget the joy of discovery that comes with actually asking for directions. When we depend solely on technology, we might miss those chance encounters, the unexpected detours, and the stories that come from those interactions.
That's what travel's all about, embracing the unexpected and being open to those new experiences.
Exactly. So as you head out on your next trip, think about how you can use technology and still keep that art of asking for directions alive. Use those GPS apps for efficiency, but don't be afraid to put your phone away and engage with the world around you.
Now let's address something that often comes up when we talk about asking for directions. What about those times when there's a language barrier? How can we handle those challenges?
It's a great question. Language barriers can feel daunting, but there are definitely ways to overcome them.
What are some tips for communicating when you don't speak the local language?
One of the most useful things you can have is a good phrasebook or a translation app. They can give you basic phrases for asking for directions, clarifying info, and saying thank you.
Those can be lifesavers for sure, especially when you're trying to communicate basic needs.
They really are. And don't underestimate the power of nonverbal communication. Gestures, facial expressions, even simple drawings can go a long way.
I've found that a combination of gestures and pointing can usually get the message across, even when words fail.
Exactly. And remember, most people are happy to help if they understand what you need. So smile, be patient, and use whatever you can to communicate.
So as we venture out into the world, let's embrace those challenges and opportunities that language barriers can present. With some creativity, a positive attitude, and that willingness to connect, we can navigate these situations with grace and even a bit of humor.
Absolutely. Language barriers can be bridges to cultural exchange and unexpected connections.
Now let's talk about something that's often overlooked when it comes to asking for directions. Gratitude.
So important. Showing gratitude is essential, not just to thank the people who helped us, but also to make those interactions positive and, just make the world a friendlier place.
What are some ways we can express our thanks when someone has taken the time to help us find our way?
A simple thank you is always appreciated. You could also add, "You've been so helpful," or "I really appreciate your time."
Those are perfect. And I think it's important to pair those words with nonverbal cues too, like a genuine smile or a nod of appreciation.
Absolutely. Those nonverbal cues add so much meaning and show that you really mean it.
So as we navigate new places and experience the kindness of strangers, let's make sure to show our gratitude in a way that's meaningful and memorable.
It's those little acts of kindness and appreciation that can really make a difference in our travels and in the world.
Now let's take a moment to reflect on everything we've talked about today. We've covered a lot from those basic phrases to cultural nuances, safety tips, and even how technology plays a part.
It's been quite a journey.
So what are some of the key things we can take away from all this? Things we can remember as we explore new corners of the world?
Well, the first thing is to remember that asking for directions is not a sign of weakness. It's a chance to connect with locals, learn about their culture, and embrace those unexpected moments.
That's a great reminder. It's about changing our perspective and seeing it as an adventure rather than a hassle.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone, try new phrases, experiment with different ways of communicating.
It's all about learning and growing as we explore.
Absolutely. And if you do get lost, don't panic. Enjoy the detours, embrace the journey, and who knows, you might just stumble upon something amazing you never expected to find.
That's the magic of travel, embracing the unknown and being open to new discoveries.
It really is. So as you set off on your next adventure, remember all that we've talked about. Ask for directions with confidence, engage with the world, and most importantly, enjoy the ride.
It's been really eye-opening, this whole exploration of asking for directions. We've gone way beyond just the basic phrases, haven't we? We talk about those cultural nuances, the nonverbal stuff, safety tips, and even how technology fits in.
It really has. And I think what we've discovered is that asking for directions, it's more than just a practical skill. It's a way to connect with people, to have new experiences, to really appreciate the world around us.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with something to think about. We talked about how technology has changed how we navigate, but has it also changed how we interact with the world? What do you think?
That's such an interesting question. Before we had GPS and all that, we relied much more on actually connecting with people and observing our surroundings. Remember those days? We memorized landmarks, we actually studied maps, and we weren't afraid to just strike up conversations with strangers.
It's like we were more present, you know, actively engaging with our environment instead of just passively following that little blue dot on a screen.
Exactly. And while technology definitely has its advantages, it can sometimes create a sense of detachment. We might miss out on those chance encounters, those unexpected detours, those stories that happen when we interact with others.
So, as you explore the world, think about how you can find that balance between the efficiency of technology and the richness of human connection. Don't be afraid to put your phone away sometimes. Embrace the art of getting a little lost and rediscover the joy of asking for directions.
You might be surprised by what you find when you step outside your comfort zone and just open yourself up to the world.
And that's the real beauty of exploration, isn't it?
It really is.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the art of asking for directions. Until next time, keep exploring, keep connecting, and keep those adventures going.